Nigeria, which is the biggest country in Africa in population of nearly 250 million Nigerians. Nigeria is the leader of ECOWAS. ECOWAS, remember, West African nations. And Nigeria is the most dominant force in West Africa. And Nigeria, as a leader of ECOWAS, is saying, we want Bazoum to be reinstated. We want the coup people to be put in jail and Bazoum to be reinstated. This has set up a big problem because the African Union, which is the overall organization of African heads of state, that organization, the African Union, has decided in a way different from ECOWAS. And the African Union is basically under the direction of South Africa. So now you got South Africa and Nigeria at loggerheads. ECOWAS, the Organization of West African States, where Nigeria is the heavyweight, has said they are giving the coup plotters in Niger 7 days to bring Bazoum back to power. The African Union said, we're going to give them 15 days to see what they're going to do. We're not going to act right now. We're going to give them 15 days. So now you have Ramaphosa from South Africa and Tinubu, who is a recently elected president of Nigeria, at loggerheads. What do we do with Niger? There is increasing support in Nigeria for an invasion of Niger by the Nigerian army to bring Niger back into the democratic fold and, of course, to put Bazoum back in leadership. We don't know how that's going to turn out. I guess in about 4 or 5 days, we'll know, because the military of ECOWAS has already said they're preparing their way to go into Niger. Now, Niger is very important. That's why everybody wants to be there. You remember a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there were American soldiers that were killed in Niger. You may not remember that incident, but I remember that incident. In fact, one of them was an African American. And the congresswoman from Florida was very, very upset that they had left his body in Niger. You may not know that story, but there was a story. And the reason why this is important is because the United States has a military base in Niger. It has a military base in Niger, West Africa. But of course, the United States has military bases everywhere, right? But not only the United States, but France has a military base, an Air Force base in Niger. This is another issue. So now you got France, the United States, at least those two powers, and on the borders of Niger, waiting to go in, are the Russians from the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group, that's a group that controls Central African Republic. They control all the mines, all the gold mines controlled by the Russians. So now they're waiting. Why is this? Titanium, uranium. Niger is one of the richest countries in the world by minerals. And in fact, it is also one of the poorest countries in the world. That's crazy. It's like, wait a minute, this is a paradox. This is the richest country in the world in terms of minerals, and yet it's the poorest people. There's a problem here. And part of the problem is that we can't get to the continental state of Africa because of many other players in this situation. That's why the realities of the Russian-Ukraine war must be looked at and understood. Many of the nations of Africa are on the side of the Russians. They're not on the side of Ukraine. I mean, the Americans say, well, why are they not waiting for the Ukrainians to do this and to do that and do that? But the African people and leaders, many of them have bought the idea that Russia was actually trying to get rid of Nazi sentiment in Ukraine. Now, y'all may not believe it, you listening to different news and so on, but I'm just telling you what the issues are. So you remember when Putin was going to go to South Africa and the international court said, well, you got to arrest him. And Ramaphosa said, we're not going to arrest Putin. And you know what Putin did? Putin called a meeting of the African leaders to come to Moscow, and they all went and sat down and talked to Putin. And they said, well, we're on the side of Russia, but we're going to work with Ukraine to bring about peace. And part of this issue is historical. Russia supported the liberation movement of most African nations against the colonial powers of Britain, France, Portugal, and Spain. So people have an allegiance based on history and on the fact that in Russia, and I mean, you do have a very strong relationship to African countries. I mean, when I was visiting Russia, the Russians made an announcement that they would like to have 25 to 50,000 Nigerians a year come to Russia and help settle Russia. And the reason for that is because their population of 120 million in Russia is very small for a country that is so vast. They need people. They need workers. They need people to get engaged in Russia. So these are the problems I'm telling you that I see. And let me just tell you that the way that we can try to get around some of this, and I'm going to come back to some of this in a minute, we need to use a digital platform to minimize religious zeal. Digital platform to minimize religious zeal. One of the things I've noticed, and I've noticed this from the time I went to Zimbabwe, believing that socialism was the way of the future, and living in Zimbabwe and going back to Zimbabwe several times after that, and seeing the incredible amount of evangelical religious zeal. I couldn't even believe it. I'm on a bus. I'm on a public bus from Bulawayo. I'm in Bulawayo. I'm on this bus in Bulawayo, and then I am riding to Harare on this bus. And the bus driver decides to put on a evangelical preacher from Louisiana, white evangelical preacher from Louisiana on the bus. And there we all, we couldn't do anything. 40, 50 people on the bus going for 3 hours or 4 hours or so, riding from Bulawayo, hearing this evangelical preacher. It was unreal. It was just surreal. I'm asking myself, what is this? And why is it that Africans, of all people, we are the ones who are most zealous about other people's religion, whether it's Christianity or Islam or even Buddhism or Hinduism? We become the most fanatical about it. We just said, we gotta do this. Wait a minute. Look at your own traditions. Interrogate your own history. Ask yourself, what do the elders and their elders and their elders, what do they think about the world? They are the ones who came up with civilization. Africa created the first civilizations in the world. Why are you waiting to come into this Johnny come late thing and just, we can't do that. Minimize religious zeal. That's important. Your religion should be your private thing.